So I'm sure you guys have been wondering, what is the best bloodlines in the game to farm the bosses? Well, look no further. In this video, you're about to find out what are the single best PvE bloodlines in this game and what are they ranked from one another. So if you guys enjoyed this video, remember to like, subscribe, let's get right to the video. Alright, so starting off at 16th place is just going to be a quick Ashes Storm. Now this is mainly because Ashes Storm is just a very spammy one. You gotta just spam all the abilities on a boss. It does a lot of damage to the boss, especially because of the low cooldowns of the bloodline itself. With the cooldowns being so low, you can just kind of just spam the abilities and you overall will do quite a bit of damage to the boss. But it kind of is one of the worst PvE bloodlines of the game, hence why it's going to be on last on this list. I do recommend you guys try to go for the other ones, but this one's okay overall. Now coming to 15th place is going to be Web. Now this was going to be mainly because of the traveling aspect of it. Now the actual traveling aspect of Web is the reason why it's going to be ranked here, because you can actually hold down the third move for a very long period of time to actually get to the next boss. So I do feel like that's a very important aspect of PvE content in this game, and I do feel like overall that Web is okay for PvE just because of the traveling move. Now coming to 14th place is going to be Lava. Now it's mainly for actually Lava Third. Lava Third will do a lot of damage to the bosses, especially if they walk through it. But the other Lava abilities are also okay for boss farming. They do a lot of damage overall, and I do think that Lava is actually a very okay PvE bloodline. And it actually is funny because Lava used to be one of the single best PvE bloodlines in the game, and now it's just one of the okay ones. I did want to include on this list just because Lava Third does do a lot of damage to the bosses. Now coming to 13th place, it could be Raikage Shizen. Now Raikage Shizen, solid 13th place on this list, mainly because actually the C-spec of the second mode. Second mode C-spec, obviously if you're really close to the boss, it will do a lot of damage to the boss. By a lot, I'm talking like 300,000 damage. Now Giovanni Shizen would be here, but unfortunately it did receive that fat nerf, the PH-18 nerf. Overall, really, I do think the nerf was warranted because people did not ever use it for PvP, but Raikage still holds the big giant fat damage numbers. Now coming to 12th place, it could be Kagoku. Now this is going to be mainly because of the M1s of the mode. If you guys actually use the Kagoku Rabbit Spirit and use the lava dimension of Kagoku, the M1s would do a ton of damage to the bosses and also a lot of damage to people as well if you want to use it for that. But people mainly use it for boss grinding because the bosses, obviously you can't get hit while you're like in the air, doing giant lava abilities to people. So it is pretty good for PvE grinding. I have seen people actually melt the bosses quite fast with it. If you get multiple people doing it at the same time, it will melt extremely fast. Just be wary of that mode drain. Now 11th place, it could be Crystal or Ice. Now Crystal and Ice both have abilities where if the boss is coming towards you, you can actually use the ability and it will do damage to the boss as they're traveling towards you. Now this actually goes in conjunction with some of the ones later in this list, but it isn't quite as good, and that's why it's going to be low in this list. Either the cooldown is longer, it doesn't do as much damage, or the actual distance of the move isn't nearly as long. I heard if you like this video right now and hit that subscribe button, you will immediately get the 10th million boss drop that you have ever gotten in this game. That doesn't make any sense. Now coming to 10th place is going to be Smoke. Now this is going to be honestly for the same exact reason as Web, but Smoke is significantly better at traveling than Web. Smoke takes less chi, it goes faster, it travels further. Now, if you guys actually want to do PvE content, you want to be a pro PvEer, if that's a thing, Smoke is your go-to traveling ability. Now I think the traveling ability Smoke, it does put it very high on this list. Well, high being like halfway through, even though it has no damage abilities whatsoever. Pretty much the traveling aspect of Smoke makes it so it should be on 10th place at this list. Now coming in 9th place is going to be Kaijin. The Kaijin is going to be here mainly because of the second ability, but the monkey of Kaijin also can be quite good. Now the second ability of Kaijin actually is the flame burst ability where you breathe fire out of your mouth. Overall, that's actually pretty good of an ability. It does do a lot of damage to the boss because the boss takes no knockback, obviously. And the monkey, like I said before, it can be really good for just diverting the boss's attention so you don't get hit and you can instead hit the boss as the boss is trying to fight your monkey. So overall, Kaijin is okay for PvE content. It's not the best, not the worst. That's what's going to be in 9th. Now coming in 8th place is going to be Tsunami. Now Tsunami, all of the abilities are actually pretty good for PvE. When people use Tsunami, they normally just equip all the abilities and spam them one after another. That does actually work quite well because, for some reason, Tsunami just seems to be really good against bosses because bosses don't take knockback. Tsunami has a lot of knockback. So, like I said, it's pretty good for PvE content because people mainly just spam the abilities. Bosses don't take knockback, so all the abilities will do the maximum amount of damage, and it just so happens that the maximum amount of damage Tsunami can do is quite a bit. Now coming to 7th place is going to be Strange. Dr. Strange up in here. Also Fate, I guess that works too. Now Strange is mainly because all the abilities actually just do a lot of damage. And by a lot of damage, I mean a lot. Like all of the abilities do a lot of damage. You can use the abilities on bosses. The stun doesn't work, it still does a lot of damage. The C spec is really good against bosses because the boss, you obviously will heal what the boss does. The Q spec also is pretty good for just being able to M1 the boss. And M1s do a ton of damage to bosses. So Strange just kind of just has absolutely massive damage output. And I do think that does make it rank higher on this list than it normally would, just because of the absolute massive amount of damage that it can do to the boss. Now coming to 6th place is going to be Shindo Akuma. Now Shindo Akuma is going to be here mainly because the clones will divert the boss's attention away from you. Also the counter is quite good. It does do a lot of damage as well, but it's mainly going to be because of the actual clone abilities. I do think the clones are really good against bosses because the bosses, sometimes they can do quite a bit of damage to you, especially with the actual rework of the bosses. They do a lot of damage now. So bosses in general, it's really good just to have a clone ability, and Shindo Akuma does have the counter, which also doubles down as a clone ability. It also does a lot of damage to bosses, which is a huge plus as well. Now coming to 5th place, it's going to be Alfurama Shizen. Now this one's going to be here mainly because Alfurama Shizen actually does a lot of damage in general. Stun does a lot of damage. Second ability is good just for, you know, keeping people in the area. And the third ability just does a lot of damage in general. Now the mode, I would say the mode is insanely good for PvE, but it just drains too much mode. I feel like I've been complaining about this for like months now. Alfurama Shizen mode should not take 200 a second. That should not be a thing. It makes it literally unusable, especially for just PvE content. I do think Alfurama has a lot of potential, and I do think it is still really, really good for PvE. I do actually use it for PvE quite a bit still, but the mode definitely has that huge issue, which is the reason why it's going to rank this low. Now 4th place, I'm not going to, you know, talk this much about it because it's very simple. Emerald. Emerald, third, does a lot of damage to the boss. It's the same as Ice and Crystal, but it does do more damage in general. I also think the ability actually is further away, which is why it does more damage, because it has more distance. Obviously, more distance, more things for the bosses to travel through. You guys can do the math. A plus B equals C. But overall, Emerald is pretty good for just that ability alone. Now, Shadow is going to be coming in 3rd place. Shadow with the C spec, man. No other ability of Shadow, just the C spec. The C spec of Shadow can literally, if you get extremely lucky with the C-Spec, you could do almost half of the boss's health in a single C-Spec. Dead serious, you could do almost half of the boss's health in a single C-Spec. That's how good Shadow actually is for PvE. If you don't have Xeno Dokai or you just don't want to use it, use Shadow C-Spec. It is extremely good for PvE grinding. Now coming to 2nd place, it's going to be Iron Sand. Now Iron Sand is actually a lot better for PvE than actually even I thought before. Iron Sand 3rd in mode specifically. The 3rd of Iron Sand works the same as Emerald, Crystal, and Ice. You use it, the boss travels through it. It does a lot of damage to the boss. You know, it's very simple. But the mode is the very unique one. The C-Spec of the mode, for some reason, I'm pretty sure because there's multiple blocks in it, it does a ton of damage to bosses. Like, I've had times where a single Iron Sand C-Spec will do like 100, like, not 100, do like 1/3 of the boss's health instantly. It just depends on where the boss is, how it's moving, and all that stuff. But it actually, Iron Sand is actually a lot better for PvE than even I thought before. Now coming in 1st place, you guys already knew this, Xeno Dokai. I feel like Xeno Dokai is just kind of always the go-to PvE Bloodline in this game. If you think of PvE in this game, you think of Xeno Dokai. It's pretty much as simple as that. If there's a PvE aspect, if you're doing PvE, a Xeno Dokai will be there. A Xeno Dokai will do it. That's kind of just all there is about a Xeno. Obviously, C-Spec does a lot of damage to bosses. You can use C1 if you don't want to drain that much mode. It does very similar damage. C2 does actually more damage, and you're higher up off the ground, so you can actually M1 people easier. And the M1s obviously do a lot of damage as well. But it does drain a lot more mode. The actual abilities Xeno are also okay for boss grinding, mainly the 2nd and 1st ability. 3rd ability, just avoid it, it hits your teammates. Now, this is actually a very temporary glitch. Minakami 2nd. The poison damage for some reason does a ton of damage to bosses and people as well. It does like upwards of like 300,000 damage a lot of the time. And if you can get the boss to walk through it, it will be a huge damage burst. And it's practically one bloodline slot, so it's really just free damage. But the reason why it's not going to be on the actual list is because it is a temporary glitch. I can almost guarantee you that this is going to get fixed very soon. Anyways, guys, it's Ashley here for this video. If you guys enjoyed this video, really like, subscribe, guys. Bye-bye.